Welcome to this episode of From the Desk of the Executive Director. It's good to have you here today. We are in front of a creche, which is a French term, correct, Kevin? Or a nativity scene in front of Beacon Insurance Services, which is actually run by a friend of mine, Matthew, who's a part of the Biloxi Businessmen's Association. And next door we have another creche, and this is our quilt shop. And then down the street we have Jacked Up Coffee and our Southern Bound bookstore. And so this is kind of a section of our downtown here in Biloxi called Howard Avenue, and further down is the real downtown. And just welcome you to this section. I wanted to film in front of the creche or the nativity scene today for a particular purpose. But before I get to that purpose, I also want to talk just a little about this coming Saturday. So this coming Saturday is International Migrants Day, which was established by the United Nations in 1990. International Migrants Day was a day to highlight the contributions of migrants, of the 272 million migrants worldwide. Now, before I get too detailed into this, I want to say that I am a migrant myself. We're all migrants because the land upon which we're living here, at least in the United States, was Indian land or indigenous land. The indigenous people, Native Americans, Indians, whatever terminology we use for those folks, they were the original people. Most of us came over from European areas, Eastern Europe, Western Europe, and other places, and now inhabit this land. In fact, I moved here from Arizona just a few months ago. And Arizona, as we know, used to be Mexico until the United States took over that section of Mexico. That's why it's called Sonoran Mexico, or the Sonoran Desert. So, one thing I want to share about migrants and about my experience is back when I was in Phoenix, the church that I pastored, First Church United Church of Christ, we were one of the central locations for individuals that were coming across the border from Guatemala, from Honduras, actually even places like Haiti and Mexico. And we were kind of a guest space. We would host 75 to 150 individuals, mostly a single adult with a child or two from Guatemala, Honduras. And then we would put them in contact with their family members throughout the states, so they could go then travel to that family member and hopefully start their asylum process. But these individuals from Guatemala and Honduras, as we got to know them, these migrants, they were really fleeing violence. They were fleeing drug cartel. Sometimes their children were being drawn into these drug cartel or other situations into the military, and they were escaping and getting out of there because they really wanted to give a better life to their children and a better and safer life to their entire family. So the thing that's important for me is why we're in front of a creche here is kind of in my worldview and my understanding is that Jesus himself was a refugee or a migrant. If you remember, the story goes that Jesus and his parents, Mary and Joseph, went to Egypt to flee violence as King Herod was determined to destroy baby boys because he heard that, quote, the King of the Jews was born. And so I think in that beautiful narrative at this time of Christmas, and it doesn't really matter what faith you embrace, Muslim, Christian, Sikh, Buddhist, this is pretty much a universal story, right? That we have individuals throughout our world that are seeking to escape violence and that are migrants coming to other countries to live in safety and to hopefully find a place of prosperity and, quote, the American dream. The challenge is, though, that our immigration system is really quite broken at our borders, and it's been broken for a long time. So one of the things that you can do this week as we look toward International Migrant Day is get in contact with a senator, congressperson, get in contact with the government, somebody from government, and say, hey, we want some change in our immigration system. We want fair immigration reform. Especially as we're looking toward this time of Christmas when the story that is so deep and so rich about Jesus and his family fleeing terror themselves and becoming migrants in a foreign land where they didn't understand the language, right, in Egypt would be very different. How I want to close today is, in my opinion, there's a lot of myths, right, around migrants or around immigration or around people that are undocumented. And I think one of the myths is it's easy to migrate here, right? It's easy to be an immigrant here legally. Why don't they just go through the process? To be very honest, the process is long and cumbersome. Immigration law is really only second to income tax code in legal complexity. So it's a very, very difficult process, and we need to simplify it. I think another myth is that immigrants abuse the welfare state. And the honest truth is that immigrants use significantly less welfare than native-born Americans. Maybe another myth is that immigrants increase the budget deficit and government debt. And the fact is that immigrants in the United States have about a net zero effect on government budgets, and they actually pay about as much in taxes as they consume in benefits. And I think another myth is that today's immigrants don't assimilate as immigrants in previous eras did. Pretty much a myth, right? Because immigrants to the United States, including those from south of the border and from Mexico, are assimilating as well or actually better than immigrant groups from Europe over 100 years ago. So those are some of my particular issues around this season of Advent and Christmas, as we celebrate birth and as we celebrate a family that themselves were migrants and were escaping violence, that we remember the many migrants and what they do to benefit the United States. Coming from Phoenix just a few months ago, I think some of the things that I understood about Phoenix is that documented or undocumented individuals that were working in Phoenix oftentimes were doing lawn care, they were washing dishes in restaurants, and they were cleaning houses, often for very low wages, because people took advantage of them. And so in my mind, I see the migrant or immigrant population as being really beneficial, oftentimes doing the jobs that maybe your average American doesn't want to do, correct? And so on Immigrant Day, Migrant Day on Saturday, celebrate the gifts that migrants bring to us, that immigrants bring to us, that people that really bring a sense of diversity, right? And they do things that oftentimes are very challenging and very hard to help their families to really give a better life for their families. So I hope that is a really relevant message for you today, especially during the season of Christmas. And at Back Bay Mission, very honestly, we don't discriminate when it comes to individuals that are documented or undocumented, or citizens or not citizens. That we serve people with our homeless services, with our energy services, with all the services that we provide without discriminating, because we believe people are just people, right? And it doesn't matter where you were born on the planet or where you live on the planet. We all have a right to a roof over our heads. We all have a right to good food and to love and to health care. So thanks for joining me today and allowing me to share a bit. And thanks to the Beacon Insurance Services for letting us film their creche or to film their beautiful nature here. And Kevin and I were doing a lot of research to try to find a church that had a creche or a manger outside. And honestly, we didn't find one. So we thought that was really peculiar. But fortunately, Beacon did. And actually, the quilt shop also has a beautiful quilt that is an example of the manger. So thanks for joining us. Continue to support us in whatever ways you can, especially through your thoughts, through your prayers, through your energy, and through your finances. And thanks for joining me. James Pennington signing off. And hopefully, next week we'll be interviewing our local coffee shop individual, Jacked Up Dixie, just a couple of blocks from here. So thanks for joining me.